What's up, Blazer fans? Hopefully you had a good 4th of July, and welcome in to another mailbag. Now, before we jump into the questions, I want to do a little channel update. Now, as you guys know, this offseason I was trying to do daily videos. I succeeded for the most part. I didn't expect to fully be able to keep up with it, but I feel like I churned out quite a bit of content this offseason. It's pretty cool to look back on, but now with the offseason kind of coming to a close, there's still a couple things that might happen, but at this point the free agency stream's done, the NBA draft live stream's done. Now I'm sure some of you might be wondering what's next for content. I'm going to go into that. Now, June was the most viewed month for Blazers Uprise in the channel's history. It was probably the most successful month in the channel's history, so I want to thank you all for your support and your engagement with the channel. The engagement is still rampant. I have more mailbag questions in this mailbag than I've ever had. But before we talk about those, I'm gonna try and do daily content through about July 24th-ish is what I got. Now, it's not gonna be daily videos. We will be streaming either a post-game show or a live watch party where we react live on stream to every single Summer League game. Now, the first game is this Thursday, July 7th, tipping off at 9 p.m. Pacific time. That's midnight Eastern time. We will be doing a live watch party right here on the main channel on Blazers Uprise as we see our first live action for Shaedon Sharpe going up against Jaden Ivey. So hopefully you can join us for that stream. It should be a lot of fun. Now, if we just do a recap, maybe a little post-game stream that will be on our second channel, Blazers Uprise Live, go check that out and subscribe if you haven't already. There's a link to it down in the description box below. After this mailbag, later today in the evening, I will have a video talking about what I'm looking for in Summer League. I'm going to cover probably 10 different things from numerous players, different traits and skill sets that I'm hoping certain guys will show off. Halfway through Summer League, I'll have a video talking about Shaedon Sharpe, and then after Summer League, I will have a video talking about what we learned from Summer League. So lots of content around that. I also have one-off videos, you know, an off-season recap, looking at the Western Conference, maybe predicting the Blazers 2022-2023 lineup. I have a Trade Talk Tuesday in a couple weeks talking about how the Blazers position themselves for next year's trade deadline. We'll have an episode of Blazers Pulse getting your thoughts on the off-season, and we'll have a couple of stream highlights videos kind of sprinkled in there. So that's enough content to be able to do stuff daily, so don't think that the daily stuff is ending. I'm going to try and keep it going through July 24th. And then after that, I'm going to take a break from then through about the end of August. And then in September, we're going to start up daily content all the way until the first game of the regular season. Anyway, that was a little channel update. Now let's jump into your guys' questions. As I said, I got asked more questions than I've ever been asked, so I'm not going to read through every question like I normally do. I'll shout people out, I'll read through them if they're short, but I will have them on the screen. Now, I put mostly every question in here. I think we have about 45 to 48 questions or something like that. There was a couple repeat questions, so if I didn't include yours, it's nothing personal. It's just there was repeats, and that's bound to happen with how many questions I got asked. So if you're not in this video, I still want to thank you for asking me a question and engaging and making this video possible. Whew, let's see if I can keep this under maybe 30 minutes. I don't know. I don't know how this is gonna go. And first, we're gonna start off with our channel members. I want to thank all these following people for being channel members. If you want to become a channel member, you can click the join button down below this video to help support the channel, and you'll get your mailbag questions answered first. I always answer members' questions first. So starting off, we got a question from David Jew. His question is about whether or not I think Brooklyn will still try and win now, even if they trade KD and Kyrie. And honestly, I have no idea what Brooklyn's plan is at this point. They may play hardball like Daryl Morey did with Ben Simmons and elect to keep those guys into training camp and maybe hope that they will move off their stance a little bit in play. That is certainly possible, but it depends on what team they end up trading with. If it's a team like Toronto, maybe you get a Scotty Barnes, maybe you also get an OG Anunoby, and you can still have a competitive team. If it's a team like Phoenix, who would probably trade 4 future firsts, and then maybe DeAndre Ayton to the Jazz, who would trade some first Brooklyn's way as well. If they can get back a ton of firsts, then I don't think they would shy away from that. So it's hard to say at this point. I don't really really have a good feel for this KD and Kyrie situation as is, and it sounds like a lot of reporters don't either, so we'll have to wait and see. Thank you, David, for being a channel member. The next question is from Pineapples. He says, how many points do you think Anthony averages next season? Thank you, Pineapples, for being a channel member. I think Anthony's point per game average is going to be right around 20 points per game. I think if you're betting, I think that should be the over-under line. If you like to do sports betting and his predicted points per game is like 18 points per game, I'd take the over on that. If it's like 22 points per game, I'd take the under. I think right around 20 is a pretty safe bet for Anthony Simons. That's pretty close to what CJ did, but obviously Anthony isn't as established as a starter next to Dame as the second scoring threat yet, and you have Jerami Grant being brought in as well, so 20 points per game is my prediction. Shout out Hyper Prime. Thank you for being a channel member. He says, if Luka Garza performs well in Summer League, do you think he becomes our third string center? And do you think Summer League will decide if Jabari Walker will be on a two-way contract or a real contract this season? I think the Blazers roster situation will decide what type of contract Jabari Walker gets. I don't think Summer League will play into that. And Luka Garza, I guess he could become the third string center. I wouldn't want to rule it out, but I mean, I don't want that guy as the third string center. He's a solid G League or overseas player. I just don't think he's NBA caliber. Shout out to Andrew Hartwell. Thank you for being a channel member. He says, who makes the biggest jump as a player this year for the Blazers? My vote is Hart, and Hart was phenomenal for the Blazers last year. It's going to be hard for him to take that sort of jump. It's actually hard to predict a jump because, I mean, the obvious choice would be Nasir Little. Anthony Simons took his jump last year, so, I mean, Nasir Little is really the only guy I could see being positioned with the role, with the room for growth that I would expect to see this season. It would be hard to vote anyone else, so I guess I'll go Nasir Little. Shout out Adam McVeigh for being a channel member as well. We got some rapid fire questions. Biggest improver, hopefully Nasir Little. Biggest surprise? Damian Lillard's defense. Most time lost via injury. I don't want to predict guys to get hurt, but, you know, if you base it off the past, Jusuf Nurkic, and that's why I'm not super comfortable with the backup situation. Regressed from last season. If anything, I might have to say Hart if you're just looking at how he played for Portland last year, where he averaged basically 20 points per game and shot the three ball super well. He doesn't shoot the three ball that well for his career. So if you're talking about a player regressing, it might be Josh Hart if you have the standard that he set with his play in Portland last season. Player of the season, I mean, you got to go Dame with that one. Western Conference final position. Right now, I probably go 7th or 8th seed. It's hard to put them above a number of teams. I think they have sneaky upside. I think they could be a home court advantage team, but this year I'm going in with tempered expectations, and honestly, that should make for a more fun season for me instead of expecting the world out of them, which I did last year, and they brutally disappointed me. So anyway, thank you, Adam, for being a channel member. Shout out Culture Buckets, a new channel member. He says, any regular season predictions? I predict that the Blazers will have a decent start and maybe get people excited, but I think their lack of big man depth could hit them in the middle part of the season if Jusuf Nurkic gets hurt or maybe starts to deal with some foul trouble or some fatigue from the season. I think their lack of big man depth could be a serious issue. I think they will be a high win team, like 48 wins or so, but I'm not sure that gets you better than 7th or 8th in the West, to be honest. Anyway, thank you to all those people once again for being channel members. Let's jump into the regular questions. ADMP says, who would be my starting small forward and who do I think will actually start? My starting small forward at this point would probably be Josh Hart, but I want it to be an open competition where whoever plays the best in training camp in the preseason earns the starting small forward job. I think there should be a competition for that, and I think Hart will win that competition. I think he's the favorite because he showed a lot of chemistry with Jusuf Nurkic and Anthony Simons last year during the games that he played, so I think the team is going to maybe hope that that will hold true this season too when you factor Damian Lillard and Jerami Grant into the starting lineup. Shout out Alex Wolf. He says, how many minutes per game do you want to see Sharp get this season? He would like to see 20. I would say there's no preferred minimum amount of minutes for Shaedon Sharpe because I think he needs to earn what he gets. I think he should get what he earns. I don't think he should be handed minutes regardless of how he's playing in the preseason. If he's struggling, then I don't think he automatically should get minutes. If he earns minutes, who knows how many minutes he should play. If he looks phenomenal, maybe he should get 25 minutes per game. It's kind of hard to say at this point, but I don't think there should be any minimum bar. Just he should earn what he gets. Shout Antonio says, have you given up hope on Greg Brown III? What would you like to see from him this coming season? Now, sorry Antonio, but I'm going to have to use your question to plug an upcoming video. My Summer League preview, I will look at traits that I want to see from certain players, and one of them will be focused on Greg Brown III, and I'll kind of answer this question. I'm not super high on him, but it's kind of dependent on something that I need to see out of him, and I think we'll be able to tell this Summer League. Shout out Ashy Larry, who says, what is Jabari Walker's ceiling on the NBA level? I think he can be a starting caliber 3-and-D guy that could maybe do a little bit off the dribble. I wouldn't expect much, but, you know, maybe a Robert Covington-esque type player, just maybe a little worse defensively and a little better as a shooter would be my comparison for Jabari Walker. Bean Tash says, how do you feel about Eubanks being the backup center? Is he good enough for the job? I do not like Eubanks being the backup center. I don't think he's backup center quality. Yes, I know he played well for a tanking Portland team that was playing against an easy schedule last season. I don't really put any stock into that. He was a fringe NBA big before he got to Portland, and I still view him as such. I'm completely fine with him being the third string big man, but with Jusuf Nurkic being a little bit injury prone, I do not like Drew Eubanks being the backup center on this team that would probably be the starter if Nurkic went down. I'm not comfortable with that, so that is my one big question mark over the rest of this offseason if the Blazers aren't done making moves, is how are you addressing the big man depth? Blazers Jr. says, is the success of Sharp this season going to determine whether the front office trades Dame? I don't see why Shaedon Sharpe would affect what happens with Dame. I think Dame's here if he wants to be here, regardless of what happens with Sharpe. Caleb wants to know what the chances are that Grant breaks out and becomes an all-star this year. I think they're very, very small, considering he wasn't an all-star in Detroit, and you would think that his numbers would have to improve and go up for him to make the all-star game this year, and I don't think his usage is going to be as high as it was in Detroit, so I think his numbers are going to go down a little bit. He might be more efficient, but I have a hard time seeing him average the numbers to get an all-star appearance, and I think it would require the team being like a top 3 team in the Western Conference, and in that case, I mean, you probably have Anthony Simons as a potential all-star guy ahead of Jerami Grant, so I don't think it's likely that Grant becomes an all-star this year. Dudley Content says, could we still maybe get Cousins? We could. Do I think we will? Probably not. Dionysus wants to know what grade I'd give Cronin this offseason, and right now, I'd probably give him a B-. I don't think he got the best market value for Anthony Simons and Jusuf Nurkic, but he didn't lose the guys, so I don't really hold that against him. The Gary Payton II signing is okay, I guess. You get a defensive guy, it's just questionable. Hard capping ourselves for another guard. And then the Jerami Grant trade worked out pretty well, and I like the Shaedon Sharpe pick, so all that factored in, probably a B-, but that could go down to a C+ if they don't address the big man depth. If they get, you know, maybe a LaMarcus Aldridge or DeMarcus Cousins or just somebody to add to our big man depth, or maybe they pull off a Keon Johnson trade or something that makes sense, then that could go up to a B. Echo wants to know Nasir's averages for next season. My prediction is about 9 to 10 points per game, 5 to 6 rebounds per game, and about 1 to 2 assists per game. Embarking Box has 2 questions. One is what schematic adjustments Chauncey should make with the roster, and to that, I don't think he should make any. They played an aggressive perimeter defense, and I think they are more built for an aggressive perimeter defense this year. Offensively, I think they need to move the ball better than they did last year, use Dame a little bit more off the ball, involve more cutting, that sort of thing, but it's hard to really get a gauge for Chauncey based off last season, considering what a mess that was. The second part wants to know what is more likely, Nurk being a solid 3-point shooter on good volume, Shaedon Sharpe earning the starting 3 spot, or Ant becoming an all-star. I would say Nurkic becoming a solid 3-point shooter is the most likely out of those 3, and then probably, I don't know, it's a toss-up between Shaedon Sharpe earning the starting 3 and Ant becoming an all-star. Chat, let me know how you'd rank those 3 down in a comment in that comment section. Harris wants to know if I'd rather have Trendon or Winslow as the backup power forward, and I would go with Trendon Watford. I think he is the better offensive player, and defensively, I don't think there's much of a gap there. I also like Trendon's ability to pass as well as Winslow's. Trendon has a little bit more size, and I have a little bit more confidence in Trendon's shot not being developable into something that could be a weapon next season. We'll have to wait and see in Summer League to see if he's making progress on that. I'm Adam, also doesn't like Eubanks as the backup center and wants to know if I think Cronin will try and fix that or if he's done completely making moves. And my gut at this point says that he's done making moves. The only move that I could foresee is maybe Keon Johnson for like a Jared Vanderbilt type of player. Keon Johnson for some big depth. That would make sense considering all the guards and wings we have. Otherwise, I don't think he's going to sign another backup big man. I think we're done. Giano says, thoughts on the possibility that Nas develops into the on-ball defender we desperately need? And he's already pretty much there. The struggles with Nas are off the ball, where he's kind of a mess. On the ball, he was pretty good. Not the most consistent, but I'm not really worried about his on-ball development. I'm actually more worried about when he's not on the ball, can he be a solid team defender and not make a bunch of mistakes? And that is something that I'm watching for Nas this season. John Mitzak wants to know what we should expect from Dame this season now that he's fully healthy. Same Dame we know on offense with some better defense. That's probably what I would go with. I think he will be a little bit more laterally quicker defensively. At least that's my hope. You know, you would think that him fixing his core might help him stop moving laterally and change directions, or maybe like kind of switch his hips a little faster and that sort of thing. Maybe it might help his cross step. I don't know. I'm just guessing here, but I'm hoping it turns into some good defensive development out of Dame. Jonathan Yu says he likes Ant as a backup point guard, mainly because of fit. He understands his impact as the scorer as the starting two. How beneficial do I think it would be for Ant to be the sixth man and we would start Sharp at the 3 and Hart at the 2? I think it would make absolutely no sense to make Ant the sixth man. You're not paying $25 million a year for a sixth man, and you're like, if you're not playing Anthony Simons less minutes to bring him off the bench, what's the difference between starting him and bringing him off the bench? The only difference is if you're bringing him off the bench, you're probably playing him more minutes in a row to end each half if you're playing him the minutes that he deserves, which I think is about 33 to 35 minutes per game. I think he is arguably the second best player on the team. You don't bring the second best player for the team off the bench. It doesn't really help much with fit either, because I think that Dame and Ant are going to stagger and Ant is going to play with the bench unit anyway. So I don't really understand the need to put your second best player on the bench just to start Hart at the 2 and Sharp at the 3. It doesn't really make much sense to me. Josh Cole asks if the structures of GP2, Simons, or Nurkic's contracts have been made public yet. They haven't been confirmed as like being backloaded contracts or anything, but with the Blazers being hard capped now, I would absolutely assume that they're backloaded contracts. The most backloaded that Gary Payton's contract can be is 5% raises, and then for Simons and Nurkic's, the most it can be is 8% raises. You can't backload a contract any more than that. So with the Gary Payton II signing, we already know pretty much what he's making year one, and it does indeed hard cap the Portland Trail Blazers. The second Josh Cole question wants to know about Isaiah Roby and if I think the Blazers will claim him. I think there's a small chance. The Blazers are pretty high on the claim list, and they saw up close and personal Isaiah Roby kind of mess up the Thunder tank a little bit, even though it still panned out for them. They got Chet Holmgren, who I had as the best player in the draft, but Isaiah Roby shot the 3-ball well last year, solid defensively, mobile, like could be a good backup big that could help the Blazers backup big man depth. So I would want the Blazers to try and claim him off waivers because they need to address their backup big man depth. JP wants to know one food that I could eat for the rest of my life. I'm going to go with pizza because it's versatile. You can have a taco pizza, you can have a Hawaiian pizza, and you can feel tropical with it. You can have a cheese pizza if you're feeling cheesy. You can have a pepperoni pizza if you're feeling basic. Like, if pizza is good and it's versatile and you can do a lot of things with it. So I would probably go with pizza. Justin Ty wants to know if we're done making moves. What about waiving Bledsoe? What minimums do you want to sign? If we don't trade Bledsoe, we basically have to waive him. So we're either trading him or we're waiving him. There is zero chance that Bledsoe is on the team next year. What minimums do we sign? I feel like we're not going to sign any else. I feel like it's going to be Jabari Walker for the 15th roster spot. Maybe not even that. If they Blazers try and duck the tax, maybe they include Keon Johnson in the Detroit trade and then sign Jabari Walker for the 14th roster spot. And in that situation, I think if they also include Bledsoe, then they would duck the tax. So I don't think any moves to go out and like specifically get somebody are left on the table right now. There are certainly some things that are possible. I just don't think the front office is looking at it. Krish wants to know if Keljin Blevins is coming back. I don't think he's coming back, Krish. I mean, the Blazers might still have a two-way spot, so don't rule it out. Maybe the meme will live on, but at this point, it's looking like it won't. I don't know, though. Maliki says, do you think Jerami Grant is going to get better fighting through screens this season with new coaching, or is that just a skill? I think it's possible, but anytime a player has been in the league and struggling with something for as long as Jerami Grant has in terms of fighting through screens when he's on the ball, I wouldn't expect him to improve even with new coaching. Maybe Chauncey can help him out with his technique and the angles he takes to get through screens because they're pretty bad, but I wouldn't bet on it considering he hasn't really shown much improvement with that over the course of his career. Michael Coral wants to know the ceiling and the floor of the current roster. He thinks floor is playoffs and ceiling is conference finals. I think the absolute floor, if the Jazz like keep Donovan Mitchell and maybe they go get a John Collins or somebody to add to him to keep him competitive, I think the floor of this team is like, if healthy, the 11th seed, because you have a lot of good teams in the West, and it's going to be hard to beat a lot of these teams out, even if healthy. Obviously, if the Blazers are super injured again, they could go as low as 13th, 14th, 15th, who knows? But if healthy, I think the absolute floor is 11th. I think the ceiling is possibly a 2 or a 3 seed if the Blazers defense is like top 10. If Gary Payton II is just phenomenal on that end, if Josh Hart helps out a lot, if Damon Ant can improve on that end, if Jerami Grant ends up being a good acquisition in that regard as well, then maybe the Blazers could be good enough defensively where they can be a surprise 2 seed like the Memphis Grizzlies were last year. Mukhtar wants to know if I think Sharp could start at the 3 if he goes crazy in Summer League. I don't think the Blazers would decide to start Sharp just because of Summer League. I think he'd have to earn it in training camp and during the preseason, but I think we will get a better feel for if he'll be able to do that in October during the preseason, just by watching how he performs in Summer League. So I think Summer League is more of a gauge just to see where he's at, not necessarily something that you're going to make decisions based off of. But if he struggles mightily, then I think you'll be able to tell if he's not ready to start at the 3. So I think there might be more of a negative confirmation than a positive confirmation based off Summer League. Quincy wants to know if I think Sharp is a better player than Jabari Walker, seeing that Jabari Walker has more age and college experience, but Sharp has more potential. And I think Sharp is a better player than Jabari Walker. I'm not sure Jabari Walker is a better defender. He's looked at as a good defender coming out of college into the NBA, and Sharp's a question mark on that end, but I think Sharp has the capabilities. And then I'm kind of unsure as to what Sharp's 3-point shot is. I think he can shoot the ball. Who knows who's the better shooter between the two? But I think like every other skill, Shaedon Sharp is better than Jabari Walker at in terms of handling the ball, athleticism. I mean, I guess not rebounding. Jabari Walker has the edge there, but he's more of a forward. Sharp's more of a guard. I think Sharp's a better passer and that sort of thing. So I think Sharp is the better and more talented player right now. Rahi asks if I think it's more likely Bledsoe gets waived or is added to the Grant trade. I think it's more likely he gets waived. He also wants to know when a KD trade will happen and if I think it's possible for the Blazers to swoop in as the 3rd team for some value. I don't know when the KD trade is going to happen. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen next offseason. I have no clue. I don't think we will swoop in as the 3rd team. It's possible, but I wouldn't count on it. Ryan wants to know who I think will win Rookie of the Year. I think it will be Paolo Banchero because he's going to have the ball touches, the opportunity, and I think he has the creation skill set that will translate immediately to the NBA, and I think he's probably the most NBA-ready prospect, so I think it's going to be Banchero. Sam wants to know if I would go all in as GM this offseason or wait until next offseason. We can't really go all in this offseason, so I think we might have to wait till next offseason. And I'll talk a little bit about next offseason in a follow-up to another question. Oh, and it's this question. Shaggy Squid says, with this offseason pretty much completed for us, do you see a pathway for us to improve dramatically next offseason? Now, here's what I think the Blazers might be looking at. I think that they are hoping that obviously they make the playoffs and their 2023 first conveys to Chicago, and the next offseason they will have control of all their future picks that they could then throw into a trade. And they're hoping that Ant maybe pops a little bit more, Sharp pops, Nasir Little pops, because if all three of those guys pop a bit, then you're talking about 3 really, really good prospects with 4 first-round picks and can come close to matching salary as he's making $25 million a year. Nas will be a free agent, so it might be hard to move him, but I think the Blazers in that situation, they obviously won't be hard-capped anymore. There might be more potential stars available via trade, maybe via sign and trade. They'll still have Gary Payton II on the team. They'll still have Josh Hart on the team. They'll still have Jusuf Nurkic if they keep him. I think the Blazers will have some opportunities in next offseason. And I think this year they're trying to be competitive. They try to get better defensively, and they're hoping that combined with maybe some young prospects popping can get them to a place where they're competitive in the playoffs. But I'm hoping their sights are like, okay, if that doesn't work, or even if that works, we're going to go all in next offseason at the latest because we think we're going to be in position to. That's kind of my thought process with this organization right now. Taylor Packer has 2 questions. He says, 1, do you have any faith that Joe Cronin will be a successful GM? I wouldn't say that I'm faithful, but I wouldn't say that I'm completely unfaithful either. It's still wait and see time for me. The Grant trade was solid, but Grant wanted to come here. The Gary Payton II signing was okay. It just has some question marks. It's still wait and see mode for Joe Cronin in terms of being a successful GM. The second question is, Tori, how did you get the best looking hair on YouTube? I don't know, man. It just happened that way. Why am I wearing this hat? You know, you like my hair so much, here, I'll ditch the hat. That Dame fan says, would you rather have Watford or Eubanks to be the backup center? Now, I picked Watford over Winslow for the backup power forward spot. I'm also going to pick Watford over Eubanks for the backup center because I think Watford is much more dynamic offensively, and I don't think he's giving up anything defensively. I think his positional defense is pretty good. The problem is he's undersized for the backup center, which is why I think we need to still maybe look to get a backup center. But if I had to pick between Watford and Eubanks, I would go with Trenton Watford. He's just a more dynamic, well-rounded player. Toby Welford wants to know what year my favorite Blazers roster was and why. I feel like a lot of people would answer this with 2019 simply because we made the Western Conference Finals, but without taking the result of the season into account, I really liked the 2013-2014 season when you had Mo Williams off the bench. I liked him a lot, and you had Dame with Aldridge, Batum, Matthews was healthy in the playoffs that year, Robin Lopez, that was a fun starting lineup. Of course, that was the first playoff series win that I ever really saw, so, you know, the result of the season was good, but I really enjoyed that roster. Trevin says, how many games do you think it will take for Drew Eubanks to establish himself as the best backup center in the league? And this year's Isaiah Hartenstein, yeah, there's no chance of that happening. Trevin, thank you for your question, though. Veek says, thoughts on how the new lottery odds have affected the league. I think flattening the odds is good for the league. You still have teams that are going to try and tank, but you're never going to get rid of that anyway. So I think it creates more intrigue on draft lottery night. I don't think it's made a huge difference, but it's a little bit more fun. And I think it's a little bit better in terms of not incentivizing teams to tank as much, considering the top 3 only have 14% chance odds at the number 1 overall pick, instead of like the worst team having 25% odds and the next team having 19% odds. Wu wants to know if I've heard any trade rumors. I have not. I think they're done, guys. I think they're done. Xander says, realistically, who could be traded from the current roster this offseason? I think maybe Keon Johnson, D. Lozada, Greg Brown. Any small contract guy like that is definitely possible. Maybe Eric Bledsoe is lumped into the Jerami Grant trade. Outside of that, I don't think any other players are getting traded. I would expect Justice Winslow back, Nasir Little. I just don't think anything's happening. Zachary says, what on earth are the Blazers going to do with Eric Bledsoe? They're either going to include him in the Grant trade or they're going to cut him. One of the two. We'll wait and see. We'll talk about it once it happens. Anyway, that wraps up this mailbag. I'm not really looking forward to editing this. This is a 40-minute recording, but hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you're looking forward to the content that I talked about at the start of this video. And as I said, you can become a channel member hitting that join button down below. Also subscribe, hit the like, subscribe to our second channel, link in description below as well. And I'm out of here. I'll catch you in the next one. Until then, as always, peace out. Go Blazers!